Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sharon Rivera. I'm a program officer in the Secretariat of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions. And I will be sharing with you a presentation on the outcomes of the recently concluded meetings of the conferences of the parties to the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions. So as you may already know, the BRS Triple Cups were held from May 1 to 12, 2023 in Geneva, Switzerland, and it was actually the 16th meeting of the Basel Cup, the 11th meeting of the Rotterdam Cup, and the 11th meeting of the Stockholm Cup. The theme for this year's Triple Cups was accelerating action targets for the sound management of chemicals and wastes. This Triple Cups was one of the biggest that was organized by the Secretariat. It was attended by almost 1,400 delegates from all over the world. We had actually almost 1,000 registered participants from parties and almost 400 participants from 165 observer entities. 54 decisions were adopted by the 3 conferences of the parties, and this comprised 28 decisions adopted by the Basel COP, 15 decisions adopted by the RC COP, 27 decisions adopted by the SE COP, and among these, 8 are joint decisions. We also had 45 side events organized at the sidelines of the 2 weeks of COP meetings. And in the first week, the Secretariat also hosted a PCB fair. And this was an event aimed at raising awareness on the urgency to accelerate action to meet the upcoming deadlines on the elimination of the use of PCBs in equipment by 2025 and the environmentally sound management of liquids containing PCB and equipment contaminated with PCB by 2028 under the Stockholm Convention. This fair featured more than 20 side events and also featured the launch of the report prepared by the Secretariat on progress towards the elimination of PCBs. Now, moving on to the outcomes arising from each COP. First, on the outcomes of the 16th meeting of the Basel COP. So the conference adopted a number of technical guidelines, the first of which was the technical guideline on the environmentally sound management of plastic wastes. And this reflected the first global understanding of how to minimize the generation of plastic waste and ensure that their collection, transport, and disposal minimize negative impacts on human health and the environment. Secondly, the conference adopted technical guidelines on the environmentally sound management of POPs wastes containing or contaminated with persistent organic pollutants. And third, on an interim basis, the COP adopted the technical guideline on the transboundary movement of electronic and electrical waste and used electric and electronic equipment, in particular regarding the distinction between waste and non-waste under the Basel Convention. So these technical guidelines are aimed at providing guidance to countries that are enhancing their respective national capacities to manage wastes in an environmentally sound and efficient way, and in their development of detailed procedures, waste management plans, or strategies. Furthermore, the COP requested further work on the technical guidelines on the environmentally sound management of waste lead acid batteries, other batteries, and also pneumatic tires. Now, with regard to the work of the small intersessional working group, the COP decided that the SIWG would further improve the PIC procedure the prior informed consent procedure, which is a cornerstone of the convention, and also extended work on electronic approaches to notification and movement documents. The COP also decided that the small intersessional working group would continue its work to develop a new strategic framework for adoption, possibly at the next meeting of the COP. Now, on legal clarity, the conference extended the work being undertaken by the conference on the review of annexes aimed at further clarifying disposal operations and hazardous waste covered under the convention. And this includes proposals by the EU to amend Annex 4 and certain entries in Annexes 2 and 9 to the convention, and also to continue to develop draft recommendations on the review of Annexes 1 and 3. With regard compliance, the COP adopted recommendations to improve parties' compliance with a range of obligations, and also adopted the committee's program of work for 2024 to 2025. And this includes work to integrate the convention's implementation within national sustainable development frameworks, which is a topic that is becoming increasingly important with regards to supporting parties in national implementation of the Basel Convention. With regard partnerships, the COP also considered and noted progress that has been achieved and extended the work of the convention's partnerships, including that of PACE, which is the Partnership for Action on Challenges Relating to E-Waste, on ENFORCE, which is the Environmental Network for Optimizing Regulatory Compliance on Illegal Traffic, the Partnership on Plastic Waste, and also the Household Waste Partnership. In this regard, the COP also considered the financial and staffing implications of having the Secretariat implement the annual subscription system. So in this regard, the conference decided to withdraw the requirement to apply annual subscription fees for business, industry, and NGOs, as well as academia, by amending the terms of reference. And this decision applies to the Partnership for Action on Challenges Relating to E-Waste, the Household Waste Partnership, and Partnership on Plastic Waste. So henceforth, partnerships will now just be funded from voluntary contributions. Now, with regard cooperation with the World Customs Organization, the COP invited parties to provide information to the Secretariat in facilitating the inclusion of waste covered under the convention in the HS codes, or the harmonized system codes. And in relation to this, the Secretariat was also tasked to continue to develop for submission to the WCO proposals for amending the HS codes for the inclusion of waste covered under the Basel Convention. On e-waste amendments, the Secretariat in this regard was tasked to prepare draft updates to a number of documents to reflect adjustments consequential to adopted e-waste amendments for review by the open-ended working group at its next meeting, the 14th meeting of the OEWG, taking place next year. Now, moving on to the Rotterdam Convention. The conference agreed to the listing of the pesticide terbufos in Annex 3, and this chemical has been identified as posing an extremely high hazard to terrestrial organisms. The amendment of Annex 3 will enter into force on 22 October 2023, after which parties will be asked if they wish to continue importing this chemical, and if so, this will then be subject to the prior informed consent procedure, thereby granting parties the right to decide on its future importation. On the other hand, there was no consensus on the listing of 6 other chemicals recommended for listing by the CRC, the Chemicals Review Committee, namely acetochlor, carbosulfan, chrysotile asbestos, Fenthion, Iprodion, and liquid formulations containing paraquat. The proposal to amend the convention with an additional annex to facilitate information exchange for chemicals and pesticides, which have been recommended by the CRC for listing, but which have not been listed by the COP, was not adopted during the meeting. The COP had intensive debates on ways to enhance the effectiveness of the convention, and agreement was reached to further address the impacts on the listing of chemicals to Annex 3 and its implementation. In relation to this, parties and observers are urged to provide relevant information in this regard, and the Secretariat is also tasked, subject to the availability of resources, to compile the information provided by parties and prepare a report for consideration before the next meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Now, with regard to work by the Compliance Committee, the conference adopted the program of work of the committee for the next biennium, and in this regard invited parties to make specific submissions to the committee if they believe that despite their best efforts, they are or will be unable to comply with certain obligations under the convention, and also encourage parties pursuant to Annex 7, and encourage parties to provide information by submitting responses to the questionnaire for identification of issues they are facing in relation to notifications of final regulatory action. This information will be useful to assist other parties to prepare and notify final regulatory actions as well. That's those were the decisions made by the Rotterdam COP, and now we will move on to the Stockholm Convention COP decisions. And one of the key outcomes of COP11, as you may know, is the adoption of the decision on procedures and mechanisms on compliance. This is a landmark decision that comes after almost 15 years of negotiations, and it sets in place a compliance mechanism for the Stockholm Convention, such that all three conventions now have compliance mechanisms in place. The procedures and mechanisms will be operated by a compliance committee and is aimed at helping parties to fulfill their obligations under the convention by examining systemic issues of interest to parties and also challenges faced by individual parties in complying with their obligations. So a call for nominations for membership in the committee will be issued before the next meeting of the COP in 2025. The report on the second effectiveness evaluation of the convention was also launched, and the report highlighted that the convention provides an effective and dynamic framework for regulating POPs throughout their life cycle, addressing the production, use, import, export, release, and disposal of these chemicals globally. And it also notes that progress has occurred since the first effectiveness evaluation exercise conducted in 2017, since the level of POPs in the environment has been shown to be continually declining. The COPs also adopted the global monitoring results, which indicated that regulations targeting POPs have succeeded in reducing the levels of POPs in humans and in the environment. A new regional center, Stockholm Convention Regional Center, was also established, and this is actually the existing Basel Convention Regional Center for Training and Technology Transfer for the Caribbean region, which is based in Trinidad and Tobago. And with the designation of this center as a Stockholm Convention Regional Center, this brings the total number of Stockholm Convention Regional Centers to 17 now. Furthermore, the conference decided to eliminate the use of 3 POPs, namely the pesticide methoxychlore and the industrial chemicals dechlorane plus and UV328. These 3 chemicals were listed in Annex A to the Convention. Methoxychlore was listed without exemptions. It is known to be highly toxic and has been used as a replacement for DDT as a pesticide. And with its listing without exemptions, it may henceforth no longer be used, produced, or imported. Secondly, Declarate Plus was listed with specific exemptions. This chemical has been used as a flame retardant and is widely used in the automotive industry and also in industrial machinery. And thirdly, UV328 was also listed with specific exceptions. This chemical is used also in the automotive industry. And with the specific exceptions agreed to for Declarate Plus and UV328, these 2 chemicals are allowed to be used for a limited period of time. The conference also requested the POPs Review Committee, which is the scientific body under the convention, to make recommendations regarding options for identifying POPs in stockpiles, products, and articles in use and in waste. And finally, welcome the report on progress towards the elimination of PCBs and urged parties to implement measures to meet their obligations under the convention with regard the draft strategy for PCBs in order to meet the 2025 and 2028 goals. Now, as mentioned earlier, the triple COPs also adopted 8 joint decisions, and just to highlight some of these decisions. Firstly, the COPs called for further strengthening the mandate for international cooperation with other international organizations, including the Minamata Convention, the Inter-Organization Program for the Sound Management of Chemicals, the Montreal Protocol, and UNFCCC. The conference also expressed support for the resolutions adopted by the UN Environment Assembly to negotiate a new international legally binding agreement on plastic pollution and to establish a science policy panel to contribute to further to the sound management of chemicals and waste. There was also an increase of 3.72% in the level of the budget for all 3 conventions compared to the previous biennium. The total budget for all 3 conventions for the biennium 2024-2025 is amounts to US dollars 31.2 million. Each conference also adopted its respective amendment to the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding with UNEP. With the adoption of these amendments to the MEU, the costs which are covered by UNEP, specifically with regard to the cost of the services that it provides, vis-a-vis those that are covered by the budget of the BRS Secretariats, are now clarified. And this decision also aligns the BRS Secretariats with the standards pursued by other conventions under the UNEP umbrella and by UNEP offices. And finally, the COPs agreed to hold the next meetings of the conferences of the parties to the BRS Conventions from 28 April to 9 May 2025 in Geneva. And the next COPs will include a high-level segment, which you may know is organized every other COPs meeting. We have here a photo of the 3 presidents. Ms. Anna Berejani from Georgia, who presided over the 11th meeting of the Rotterdam COP. Ms. Kima Gardiner from Trinidad and Tobago, who presided over the 11th meeting of the Stockholm Convention COP. and Mr. Reggie Hernaus from the Netherlands, who presided over the 16th meeting of the Basel COP. Now, moving on to follow up for parties to the COPs. I will not be going over each and every call or request for information that are reflected on the screen. You will be receiving a copy of this presentation after this briefing. But as you may know, a number of decisions adopted by the COPs invited parties and others to provide information and to facilitate responses to the various invitations for information. The Secretariat prepared a letter enclosing a summary of the individual decisions that contain such invitations. The information that is set out have been sent to parties and are also available on the respective websites of the conventions. The invitation for information pertaining to joint issues have been included in each of the 3 individual letters. So just to note that apart from inviting parties to submit information, other decisions also call on parties to submit comments to particular documents and also invite parties to nominate experts to specific bodies, such as you will see on the screen, inviting additional experts, for example, to participate in the SWG, SIWG, among others. Also, just to note that when the request states TBD, to be determined, this just implies that the Secretariat will provide subsequently additional information regarding the submission of information, including the modality, the deadline, and other details. And also, just kindly note that the contact person or focal point from the Secretariat are reflected in the letters that have been sent out to parties. So you may get in touch with these members of the Secretariat if you require further information regarding the call for request for information or call for nominations or comments to specific documents. So thank you very much for your attention, and in case you have any questions, you may just raise your hand or enter your query on the chat box. Okay, there's a question from Ms. Wooldridge from the UK. On the joint issues, there were a number of acronyms. So let me go back to that slide. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, apologies for the acronyms. We love acronyms in the UN. So I think this refers to the first bullet. So this is just an enumeration of the entities or the international organizations that were referred to in the decision, um, to which the conference, the triple COPs encouraged the further strengthening of cooperation with these international entities. So, for example, we have the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable, just to be sure, 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production patterns. So that's 10YFP. Then SciChem is the strategic approach to the integrated chemical management. UNEA 6 is the UN Environment Assembly 6th meeting. Minamata Convention, Convention on Biological Diversity. MP is Montreal Protocol, UNFCCC, UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. IOMC is Inter-Organization Program for the Sound Management of Chemicals. Yes, I think that's it. I hope I covered everything on the screen. And again, the presentation will be provided to the registered participants after this briefing.
Presentation and feedback from, or a summary of feedback from the main conference. I just need to understand from our side, we were fortunate this time to be part of the conference, but in future, due to financial constraints, we are unable to participate maybe in all BRS meetings or conferences. I just need to check, because now I received the link to register, or an opportunity to register to participate in this meeting, because I was part of the conference. And in case I'm not able to attend the next conference, is it possible to still receive the link to register in this outcome? Or maybe I think the question is it possible to participate in this outcome even though I was not part of the conference? Thank you.
Oh, so you reference the outcome. So you mean this briefing, if it's possible to participate in subsequent briefings organized
Yes.
by the Secretariat. Yes, these webinars are actually, information on the webinars are actually published on our website. And it also, the website also includes information on other events aimed at orienting parties and also representatives of other entities to activities of the Secretariat. So even if you did not participate in person in the COPs, like I see some registered participants today from industry, for example, that are online during this webinar, you can still probably just monitor the BRS website and see if there are any upcoming events or orientation briefings provided to parties and other external entities. So the answer is, to be succinct, yes. And thank you for your interest in our work. We appreciate it. There's a question from Mr. Al-Katani if there will be a follow-up document with all the deadlines updated and where they can have a copy of it. If you are referencing the follow-up document that are on these slides, yes, they are. These are actually posted already on the website of each convention. So you will see here the request for information, the specific deadline, if any, and other information, including the focal point in the Secretariat in case you have queries. So the deadlines reflected here are based on the deadlines reflected in the decisions adopted by the COP. So these are based on the decisions themselves, and so you may check on the website, but we also circulated the letter containing this request for information or call for nominations to all parties. So I hope, Mr. Al-Katani, I responded to your question. Just posted the links to the respective follow-up web pages on the chat box. So kindly refer to these links. So and here you will see this request for information and nominations. There's a question from Mr. Grasso on whether the final reports of the COP will be published soon. We are still working on the final versions of the reports, and they will probably be circulated sometime in the fall or the third quarter of the year, because they need also to be circulated in different languages. So in the meantime, we just have on the website the reports that were read out during the COP meetings. So just kindly check in again on the website around the third quarter, by which time we will have the different language versions of the final reports of the COPs. There's a question if the recording will be available on the BRS website. Maybe I can ask my colleague Marilyn if the recordings are actually posted on the website. Yes, the actual recordings will be posted. Kindly check in on the website maybe next week, and the recordings of the different sessions will be posted there. So before this is actually the last briefing being organized by the Secretariat, but we also had another session in English and a session also in French and Spanish this week. So they will all be made available on the BRS website. So kindly check in next week. Are there other questions from the participants on the presentation? Okay, if none, you may still get in touch with us in case you have any queries on the presentation. Otherwise, just to mention again that this presentation as well as the recordings will be made available on the BRS website. And thank you for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you in our next meetings. Have a nice day, everyone.